Okay, welcome councillors, staff, presenters, anybody who's online. Welcome to this Tuesday, 4th of June briefing. Our list, Northern Transportation Alliance Transport Operations briefing. Welcome Calvin and Bernard.
Morning, Kaka.
Morning, gentlemen. Morning.
So, take the briefing paper as read. Some of the key highlights for this month. So with the contract in its last 2 or 3 months, we have stepped up our auditing of both ordered works and routine works. We are seeing a drop off in some of the quality performance and deliverables that's seen through both the audit results and the actual performance measures that are through the contract. While not unexpected at this stage of a contract, it is disappointing, but we are actually actively working with Ventia to make sure that what is done to a high quality and is continued to actually make sure it's delivered as Piper are actually paying for and getting value. So as you'll see, the at-risk score for this month dropped again. Last month it was around the 50% mark. This is now it's down to 33.35. As I mentioned, given Ventia are struggling to hold resources through the last month or so of the contract, they're trying to work on what's critical at the moment, and it is actually being seen through some of their completed works. So they had 192 roads of the 701 roads on the Kaipara network. But as you'll see, there were 119 sealed inspections and 254. There are some inspections running behind that we're working with them on catching up on. We are still very active in the emergency works program. So 131 individual tasks on the phase 2 tidy up completed. So 4 more dropout underslips repaired on 3 roads. And 132 culvert clearance and flushing. We're still on track to complete the majority of the phase 2 works by the end of June 2024. And of the 15 phase 3 complex sites, we've got the geotech detailed investigation back on 7 of the first 8 high priority sites. So that'll allow us to do the assessment of what repairs are required and get that out to market so that they can be constructed in the next construction season. And procurement plan for the remaining 7 sites has been prepared and about to go out. So that'll be the remaining designs for those 7 sites. On the unsealed network, with a bit of moisture coming back in, we've been able to continue with the grading program. That's really ramped up through May. The intent is to do a full blanket grade across the network leading into winter to get all the roads ready. Rehab works completed on Tramline Road, and the Poto Road previously deferred rehabilitation is now in full swing. And then there was also continuation of drainage activities being a focus through for the next through to the end of the financial year. So we've been working with Ventia and Blair on making sure that any available OPEX funding that's still in the NLTP is uptaken on targeting drainage activities. And finally, we continuing to see a downward trend of customer requests. A lot of that is related to both the drainage works that we're undertaking, but also the fact that we've reinitiated the grading with the moisture content. So that is seeing some of the roads come back into normal expectations, and the customer requests are dropping off. And that is the highlights.
Any questions? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could we just go back to the first slide, please? Go back there. Yeah, I'm not an expert mathematician, but I'm just that 96.88% compliance Now, is that 26 out of 192? If I round those numbers off, I'd say 200 against 20, say, would be,
The way the compliance scored is it's it's of total. It's a weird calculation. So in effect, the compliance assumes that 26 failed out of even though we only audited 192, it assumes 26 failed out of the total completed.
so what's that against 300?
So close to 400,
Eh?
close to 400.
I see.
361.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that was one question. The other thing was, I'll just take the opportunity, and this is, I don't need an immediate answer, but you might know off the top of your head, because it's something I'm raising at tomorrow's meeting, with the certain roads in the Raupo Drainage District, and I'm not sure which ones they are, they serve a dual purpose in terms of providing a subdivision between subcatchments within the drainage network to manage the volume of water going into each part of the outletting system. So were you aware that was the case, that in Cyclone Gabrielle it was exposed that there were some roads weren't doing that job because they got too low? And was that something that's on the horizon to address?
So through the chair, yes, we have been made aware that during the severe weather events, a few of the roads that serve the purpose of but weren't working as expected. We do consult with team members within Kaipara who support the Raupo board in making their decisions when it comes to the likes of culvert renewals and that may impact on those catchments. With regards to the roads, we are working through the rehab process of rebuilding those pavements. And again, in those areas, we do consult on what that pavement construction looks like. Yeah, just I probably can't respond to exact locations though, and that information hasn't been forthcoming our way. So I do probably need to look further into that.
Okay.
Try to understand it. But, yeah.
Through the chair, just adding to that as well, just in general, most drainage is designed for a certain 1 in 100 year event. So often if we get an event such as Cyclone Gabrielle, you will find there are issues that it's beyond its design life as well. So design capacity as well. So there's a combination of those two things.
Yeah, because my understanding is that like roads do wear out and can get lower. You're building on a swamp, so they'll sink quite apart from just wearing out as well. So, okay, thank you.
Councillor Larson, followed by Councillor Howard.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Colin. At our last briefing, information on the quarries that the aggregate comes from and an understanding of how the quality of that aggregate and mixing of it, if any, with clays is carried out and how and when that is audited. That could
I must apologise.
that could wipe the top of the list. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I'll definitely follow that up. Sorry, that one did slip off the radar.
Yeah, through the chair, I have compiled a bit of information there. It's just a matter of getting it through.
Yep.
Apologies.
Brilliant, thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Gentlemen, you talk about the Ventia situation and, we're still chasing, there's still work still to be done. Is there any contemplation that they won't achieve some of their given tasks? And if so, how do we get around that?
Through the chair, I think at the moment we're working on looking at two aspects. One is making sure that Kaipara are getting value out of the lump sum component. and looking at options in terms of where that value isn't being achieved, what contractual mechanisms may be available. The second one is ordered works, and in those cases, we're prioritising which ones they need to do. In most cases, if they being OPEX work, it is not able, that funding is not able to be carried forward. So we're really working on making sure that we are able to get as much of that subsidy funding uptake in these last, not now it's month, but as well. The reality is, given the situation they're in, we can push hard for completion, but they are only able to do what they're able to do. From a corporate side of things, Ventia are really supportive of finishing this contract really well. I think on the ground, they are starting to see the impact of losing. So but we are pushing them to use subcontractors and the likes to try and get this work done.
Okay, all right. I mean, do you sense that there will be much of a shortfall?
Through the chair at this stage, it's hard to know. In different areas, there will be some underspend. In other areas, we've highlighted using a portion of that underspend to do other activities that they're better resourced to do and provide value, such as drainage and those sorts of things. But I think this is a compounding impact, given that if we look back on this 3-year cycle, year one, we had delayed funding confirmation, which impacted year one's program. Year two, we obviously had the storms and everything else. We're really pushing to make sure that the things that are critical regarding drainage and slip repair and emergency works, phase two, are the ones that are prioritised for completion.
Okay, thanks, guys.
I've got a question on attachment B, page 5. It's quite a significant residual funding. Well, it's $461 plus $1,000. And here in this report that it will be utilised to implement 2 modular raised crossings outside St Joseph School and Dargaville Primary School. So there's 2 of them in to construct the missing footpath section on Gordon Street. Have you got a breakdown of the individual costs for those 3 items?
Sorry, can I just catch up to where we are?
Yeah, it's on attachment B, 5. Attachment B.
The transport choices package
Yeah, the
Yeah.
transport choices package.
that we, the government pulled the funding.
Sorry, yep,
Million?
yeah.
With the residual balance that we bought a couple of months ago.
So this was the one that was bought last month. So we do have a breakdown. I don't have it in off the top of my head. But I think if I go back to the briefing paper from last month, I think there was a breakdown provided. But I can.
Okay, if you could through that to me.
Yep.
Any further questions? Councillor Williams?
On the completed emergency works, you've got the 4 dropout under slip repairs done. What roads were they completed on?
They are, that were. I think they say them in the Ventia report. Mountain Road underslip. There's a full road closure.
That's the only one we missed, is it?
During May, I can find them. There were.
It was just out of interest, wasn't it?
Yeah. I do know in May they're working on Arapahi Road, Central Road and Pukehui Road at the moment. So, but I can find out exactly which 4 they were, which 3 roads, sorry.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Does that complete the presentation? Thank you.
You're on next as well.
Sorry?
Calvin and Dawn are on next.
Yeah. Hey, that's the end of that presentation. Okay, we'll move on to the item 2.
It is mentioned somewhere.
New Zealand Transport Agency consultation on change to emergency works policies. And financial assistance rates, FAR.
Take the lead on this one.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. What we're here to present today is the NZTA and NLTF Emergency Works Policy Review. So they've put a new policy out, a draft policy, and they're requiring feedback on this policy, which we wish to collate from everyone. In essence, the government wishes to transfer the risk and the increased cost to council rates for storm damage repairs. The intent is for councils to improve their resilience of their network and to include increased fundings in their LTPs to cover storm damage. Their timing is a little bit off there.
Did you tell them that?
So what I've pulled a couple of slides together to just try and explain, it's not the simplest things as to how we get the funding for emergency works. Currently, the philosophy that they have in the policy is that if a storm is under a 1 in 10 year storm, that is funding that is done through our LTP. So we don't get subsidy for that. If the storm currently is over 1 in 10 years, we can apply for funding at our FAR rate, which is 62%. When that value of emergency works exceeds 10% of our MO&R budget, we can then apply for an enhanced FAR. So we add 20% on top of our FAR, so we get 82%.
Can I just ask you, how do they measure 1 in 10 and 1 in 20?
That is the point that we want to make. Currently, they just give us the storms, and NZTA has confirmed to me that they don't actually check.
Oh.
Because the argument we have is, for example, the Mangawhai storms, that was clearly a very intense storm. But at the time that happened, Dargaville wasn't affected. They have no criteria to say, well, does that affect the whole of Kaipara? We can claim for damage in Dargaville if the storm was in Mangawhai. They've been very silent on that. So it's one of the feedbacks we want to go that this is not a great way to do it. We're going to be fighting as to what is a storm effect for the region or not.
I mean, we get a lot of that in the north. I mean, I go back to Kerikeri when I was a young fella, and we had a cloud burst in Waipapa.
Yep.
Which was greater rainfall Bay, and yet 10 kilometres away there was no rain.
Yep.
So that's an issue.
It is an issue, and it's one of the concerns that we have with this. So very simply, what they're looking to do now is categorise it in 4 ways. So the first one is readiness. So if we hear that there's a storm coming, we've got to use our LTP money to ready the network, which is what we currently do with our contracts. They are then willing to respond, to pay for response and recovery. So response is the immediate response for public work. So basically to make sure that there's no further risk, that we can get the roads open. The recovery, and this is where there's a change, if you want to click the next button. Currently, we can reinstate our roads to the current customer level of service. What they're offering us with the new policy is that it's a like-for-like basis or a reduced level of service. In other words, they will not guarantee to fund us back to what we currently have, and the shortfall will have to again come from council.
That's really cool.
Yeah. On the spot.
Yep. Again, the details of the splits from current, we're doing a 1 in 10 year storm event. As I said, NZTA has confirmed that they don't even check these days, but they want to change it to a 1 in 20 year event, but they've provided no details. The conditions of the enhanced and bespoke funding that I talked of was when it's 10% of the approved MO&R budget, we can claim an enhanced subsidy plus 20%. They want to drop that to plus 10%. Currently, we also get a FAR, so that's a third level of funding, as it were, and that's currently provided from NLTF currently. But what they're doing right now is they're going to say that there is no bespoke funding through the NLTF. It will come from Crown funding, and councils may have to apply separately to get that Crown funding.
Not crowdfunding, is it?
So an example of,
Not crowdfunding, no.
so the example of bespoke funding at the moment is the plus 40% that councils received for the Gabriel response. So in that case, the Crown did top up the NLTF, and the NLTF was used as the mechanism. In future, it may be that individual councils need to negotiate with Crown directly on what bespoke funding is available as a result of a significant event.
Okay, in real terms, that's the next slide. It is a very complex financial calculation because it's dependent on when the works are done, whether it's under the 10% MOR, whether it's above the 10%. I've simplified what we do on a typical storm for Kypra. So we've literally had 3 major storms for Kypra in the last 3 years. We've had one that I would calculate as less than 1 in 10-year return period. We've had one that's been about 1 in 20, and we've had the larger storm events, which was the Gabriel. Costing everything up, that comes to about $31.5 million worth of storm damage that's had to be, or needs still to be repaired. Under the current system and the policy we have, the local share for council comes to about 4 million. Using the new policy, that share will go up to about 6.6. So as a council, you would have to find another 2.5 million from your rates to pay for the storm damage if this policy goes through.
Over the 3-year period.
Over the 3-year period, yeah.
Do we have any insurance influences in that mix?
So at the moment, most councils do not insure their roading assets. And with the exception of some councils do bridges, but I don't think Kypra do. So yeah, at present, there's kind of the emergency works policy is almost the insurance policy for councils. But then you're given what's happening in the insurance industry at the moment and the premiums going up. I would hate to imagine what a premium on a roading network would actually be. So, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
What were they expecting they'd get in the way of response from local authorities?
So through the chair, I think they're fully aware of what response they're going to get from local authorities. They are very clear up front that at present, the National Land Transport Fund is under significant pressure for normal events. And the events over the last 3 years have drained not only the 3-year cycle, but any emergency reserves. They have been given instruction that they need to operate within the constraints of the NLTF. So they are having to look at how they can change their policies to move that. So
would it be fair to say this is more akin to them giving us advance notice of what's going to happen?
It is. The challenge is that they're saying that the 10%, the fire rate, the enhanced fire rate would take effect from the 1st of July 25, but the other policy changes would take effect from the 1st of July this year. Puts all councils at risk.
So
On our,
Correct.
I think one point of common feedback from all councils is the timing.
Yeah.
So I think within our proposal, we would be putting forward that any change to this process, given that councils have gone through LTPs, should align with the next LTP period as a minimum.
Yeah.
And I think the other one is, I think it does mean, given the +10, +20% FAR, that there is a need to actually look at condensing wherever possible your phase 3 program, should this go through, to make sure we get as much of phase 3 completed in year 1. But there are industry constraints on that as well, and design constraints. So.
Councillor Howard.
My concern really, I'm wondering, is there any way we can go back, or are other councils going back to seek greater clarity? I mean, I take from what you're saying that there is so little clarity on this 1 in 10 versus 1 in 20. It's a significant change. 50% increase in potential costs. So I think that we've got a right, haven't we, to demand absolute or better clarity on the definitions, because we've just had two examples of significant events that don't cover the whole district.
So through the chair, we're having these briefings with all three district councils at the moment. So the plan from here is to actually put together a draft submission by the 12th of June.
For the CEOs to
For the
review on the
CEOs.
12th, so.
Yeah, so that'll be provided to the CEOs on the 12th to consult with mayors and RTC members on any final tweaks related to districts. The reality is that the issue is the same for all districts. The feedback is relatively consistent for all districts. But the key point at the moment is the timing of the changes or the proposed changes. And the impacts that has on LTPs moving forward. The definition of a storm event under the 1 in 10,
Yep.
1 in 20 year. And
Suggesting the drop back 1 in 20 to just.
yeah, so suggesting that they actually drop that measure and refer it solely back to the 10% of your maintenance operations values, which is effectively how they incorporate it at the moment. And yeah, just in general, getting more clarity on what their intent is. We know from this process and the way it's been written and the way it's been socialised that this is solely about how to manage constrained funding. But it is a transference onto councils and we need to make that clear. But
Without a lot of guidance.
yeah, but our formal consultation period ends on the
14th.
14th is when we get it back from CEs. I think the 19th.
No, 14th we have to submit.
Oh, 14th we have to submit. Okay.
That's not a lot of time.
Yes. So staff, we received notification of this, I think, 2 weeks ago, 2nd of May. Oh, so
CEO.
staff have been working through it and we've been working with the CEs on what it is. We've done a briefing with Far North. We're doing this briefing. We're doing RTC next week and Whangarei next week. But so far it's been, yeah, it's not surprising in terms of the feedback that needs to be incorporated into the submission.
Just want to have a suggestion for the cover sheet, which would be a picture of a turkey farm and a sign saying, yeah, we're all voting for Christmas.
I think the reality is the industry have been asked to submit. I don't think Waka Kotahi will be surprised by the submissions. It will just be a case of what is then taken from that. So once I think they've undertaken to receive the submissions and they're looking to have the finalised policy out by the middle of July, I think it is.
They want to implement it by the 1st of
Oh,
July.
they want to implement it by the 1st of July.
So
So
it's come out before us.
So we expect to receive feedback on what the final one is by the 1st of July, and then we'll come back to council with.
Predetermined by some.
Yeah, I'd say so.
So they consulted with us.
You are being told.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I would strongly be supporting is surely it doesn't matter whether it's 1 in 10, 1 in 20, it should be effects assessed.
Yes.
What happened, you know? Thank you. Any further questions?
I just asked.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Calvin, Dawn, so are we using a case study like this to demonstrate the impacts of what their policy is on a region that's had considerable storm event? Because I'd be very comfortable with KDC being used for that.
Yep.
Post effects as well.
So we have similar tables for 3 councils. So.
Yep.
Cool.
Based on what happened over the last 3 years.
Yeah. Because it does have the possibility of concertinaing as well, right? If we get more storm events over the next year, for example, we don't even recover from the last storm events.
Yes. So within your LTP at the moment, you've got obviously local share funding based on current projected FAR rate calculations. So not only is that potentially impacted post July 2025, but if there's any subsequent storm events post then as well. So yeah, it is a concertina event.
Thank you.
It would be fair to say it would be a bit like the Christchurch earthquakes, like the first earthquake was bad enough. The real damaging one came later after things were already weakened. And we're vulnerable to that now, we're just getting our systems back in order. And if we got hit again, we recovered, well, they were that much more vulnerable.
Yeah. Okay, item 3, class 4 gambling venues policy. Virginia Smith will present this item online. Welcome, Virginia.
Well, Mr Mayor, she's actually here in person. She's just not here in person at the moment. I think Alana's just trying to call her over to get here. I did pass her in the car park as I was walking in, so
Is there another item we can skip to?
Jesus, the one after that.
so we've got the next two items. Then we've got other team who aren't here either.
Can
So
we have a coffee break
Yeah.
now?
we'll just have a 5 minute if you could.
Let's have a
We'll
five-
get her over.
5-minute, half-hour lunch break.
Oh, yeah.
5-minute coffee break?
Tea.
Thank you.
Morning tea.
Here for item 3 and 4.
Councillors, this is just an introduction to the Class 4 gambling venues policy. We're currently doing a statutory review. So we'll just get straight into it. Thank you. So as you can see, this only applies to non-casino venues that operate gaming machines. So we're talking pokie machines here that are located in generally our pubs and our clubs in the Kaipara District Council. The Gambling Act, of course, section 101 is mandatory for us to have this policy, as you'll see in the report, which I take as read, sorry. I take my report as being read. The Gambling Act provides us what must be in our policy and what may be in our policy. And you'll see that down in the discussion part of the report there. The Act requires a policy to specify whether Class 4 venues can be established in the Kaipara District Council. It may also restrict where venues may be located. It may provide restrictions on maximum machine numbers and may include a relocation policy. Our current policy has all of these factors in them. One of the things that I wanted to discuss today, because the report, as you see on page 2 of this, is your key findings. From the initial analysis, the policy is performing well, and in my opinion, does not need to be amended or replaced. It's functioning well. It's being effective. We're down now to, we've lost one venue, and that's 3 machines as well. So it is working. There is, if we choose not to, I'll just move on. If we choose not to consult, well, then we can just notify. That means no consultation process or anything like that. If we do choose to amend the policy, we'd have to go through the consultation process. One thing that I will bring to council's attention is that we have not consulted with public on this policy for the last two reviews, just 6 years. 2018 was the last time we consulted with public, and it wasn't to change the policy, but what it was to see if the policy direction, which is your capped and all of those different directions, were suited for the community. That one there actually got a lot of favour for being capped, which is very restrictive. You restrict your numbers and everything like that. But the council at the time used the balanced approach, which was community benefit from the funding, providing entertainment factors as well as the harms. And so we got the sinking lid policy. Any questions?
Is there any commentary anywhere regarding what happens when you get to a point where you have closed so many machines down that it drives the gambling underground? Is there any evidence of that?
No. What there is though, the evidence that we are seeing is that a lot of people are going more online now. Our DIA, Department of Internal Affairs, who regulate these policies and gambling in New Zealand, are still trying to figure out how to combat that. So at a community level, I think that the sinking lid policy is great. We've got evidence there that suggests that this is the best policy approach. I believe we should maintain that. It creates that balance. And also too, we have no control over any underground, we wouldn't have any control of that type of gambling, same as online.
Yeah, and sometimes you get opposite and equal reactions to a policy. For example, if you charge $300 for a packet of cigarettes, obviously people are going to go grow their own.
Yes.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah.
Is there any questions, any further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wonder, I think you've sort of made passing reference to it there. How relevant is it for us to be considering the benefits that might accrue to community groups that would be able to apply for grants from the proceeds of Poki's operations?
Unfortunately, we don't have any control of where those funds go. It'd be great if the funds came directly back to where they were created. Like, for instance, this year alone, last year's thing was $2.2 million at the 6 venues. That's how much money was spent. And we only received back so far was 185 in grants, $185,000 in grants back into our community. So whether our community groups are moving away from applying because of the association to the activity, or I don't know what's happening there. I looked on the granted website, which gives us where everyone's been granted money. I looked at Kaipara District Council. There were 4 people there that said they were from Kaipara, but they weren't. They were actually in Auckland. When I went and researched their background, they're actually associations in Auckland. They had no association to Kaipara. So I rang DIA and made them aware of that so that they could get our figures properly, correct. So there's situations like that that's going on as well. It's a bit annoying, to be fair. And at the last, because I did do the review on this in 2021, at the last review, I managed to get all of the trusts to provide us with that information of who had applied, how many people had applied from our communities and how many they had been granted. They didn't come back with me with that information in time of this review. So that was really helpful last time, but unfortunately they didn't come back.
But maybe is that something that we could do to publicise the fact that, well, that money's there and groups don't make the applications, then it's not going to come back into our district.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess my concern is that people who are the most needy are the ones that are probably contributing the most.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Virginia, just, it's more background than anything. Is there, I mean, that's staggering when you say, is it $2.3 million raised through, I think it's
55 machines.
55 machines now, and $185,000 comes back here. So is there a mandate from DIA that X% of funds generated must come back into
The community.
districts, the community?
Yeah, no, there isn't, and that's the issue. So 40%, you'll see in the report, 40% generally is given out for those purposes, for the approved purposes of each trust. And unfortunately, that's all that it is. So DIA have no control as long as the trust who collects the money is giving minimum of 40% back into the community. So the community can be anywhere. So we can generate that $2.2 million here, but that $2 million will probably go to Auckland or something. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it compounds the situation that we're finding is that, we talk with any community group, and they're all struggling for funds because there's less and less funds. So the government through DIA are actually pulling the old noose without providing other solutions, because certainly it seems that lotteries aren't, filling the void.
It'd be, for me, that would actually really justify keeping pokie machines and probably giving it to more in, if the money was guaranteed to come back into the community, because 2.2 million would help everybody, but unfortunately that's something Department of Internal Affairs controls, and unless they're prepared to make that regulation at their level, we unfortunately don't have the power to do that.
Well, I mean, we're only small, but have we made a submission along those lines to DIA?
Not to my knowledge, no.
I guess if we don't say it, they'll never know it.
That's true.
But is that perhaps where we could do a job of letting our communities know that money's sitting there? And if our groups don't pick it up, well, it'll go elsewhere.
although, is it, sorry, Mr Mayor, we're having a conversation here, but that comes back down to what Virginia said, is that it's in the articles of the bodies that have the pokie machines and what they allow, as I understand it, what they allow funds to be given out for. And so they might be too generous in terms of their own articles. And it might be that a third conversation has to happen with only six places now that to restrict granting of grant to only bona fide organisations within the district. So there might be three conversations that need to be had.
I believe at the last, through me, sorry, I believe at the last review, it worked out to be an 18% success rate. And when I've done all the workings out about how many people have been granted, how many of our groups. So out of the 100% that had applied, 18% were successful.
From our own
Yeah.
sources. So, I mean, that's another part of the argument, back to the suppliers.
Okay,
So what I'm looking for today is, and I'll be looking for this in the next policy, is so we have the option if council, after reading this, if council chooses not to amend it or and go with the recommendations of the reports, is that we don't consult, or if you would prefer to consult with the community, it's just to sort of give me direction on how to get a decision report written up for you.
we got direction around the table at this point. Councillor Williams?
Thank you. I guess here it says the policy objectives being achieved and the policy is effective and efficient. So we could just have a review. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Vincent?
I don't have a clear-cut answer, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
On the one hand, there must come a time when it would be good to give our communities the opportunity to provide their feedback. But on the other, we've just gone through, long-term plan process, and we'll be heading into a district plan public consultation process in the future, and you can get consultation fatigue. I wonder if it would be best just to save our shots for where they're most important for us feedback, and maybe this is a time when we just roll it over and focus on the bigger things.
Okay, your advice here, CE Mass?
Well, through you, Mr Mayor, we're asking you guys for direction, but I believe that the direction received so far is the right one. I don't think we need to consult. It's a fit for purpose policy. We've proved that, and we just roll it over and move on. That's been my take on it, but that's up to
Got
you.
enough on our plate.
Yep, that's true. And I would concur with that, but I do think that there have been some opportunities to communicate that have been highlighted. And I think that, at least because there are a limited number of organisations that are providing these funds, it's not an onerous task to connect with them. Maybe that's the first area of discussion.
Actually, could I just tease that out a bit?
Yep.
I think it isn't the individual premises which have the pokie machines that dish out the money. It's the likes of pub charities and Lion Foundation. I think it might be one other. So they are the ones that have set up their criteria. However, I think there's, in terms of my dream of how our community advisors are involved with supporting community groups in applying for funding externally, that's perhaps something they can take on. I mean, some might find it morally repugnant, and it is getting our hands dirty, but the money's there regardless. And perhaps that's something which our staff can do do that promotion exercise and assisting with applications being made and maybe helping to polish up such applications so that we can improve on the 18% success rate and get that much more of that money which has been collected within our district, redistributed within our district.
Good thinking. Yep. Okay, move on to the next item.
So the next one is our TAB venue policy. Again, this is a statutory review. As you see, that report is very thin, and I'll take that one as being read as also. The TAB venue policy is only applicable to standalone TAB venues. So we're not talking about TAB outlets that are in pubs or clubs, or these are standalone. We haven't had any applications since the last one closed in 2015. Our policy remains fit for purpose. It allows for up to a maximum, we've capped this one, maximum of 2 venues, if we get one. And again, we're allowing maximum. So we allow them to be here, but maximum of 2. And they are restricted also too by their location is restricted by proximity and also district plan rules. I'll just go through. So nothing's changed. You'll see that nothing's changed since the last review. There's been no significant changes. If anything, I did read an article where TAB were closing down outlets in small rural communities. And that's because they're pumping their money and their resources into online and remote betting. So, yeah, the findings showed the policy objectives being achieved. It's efficient and effective. Remains fit for purpose and doesn't require an amendment. So that's what the review did. Again, we're back at the consultation. If council chooses to amend the policy, we are required to special consultation process underneath the LGA. If we retain the current one, we are not required to consult with community.
I just see on number 3 states the policy is compliant with the Act, it's efficient and it's achieving its intended purposes and objectives. So why would we want to interfere with what's not broken? So I think, well, I hope that the rest of my members here that we keep the policy. It's fit for purpose. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia.
Efficiency. There's a rock in it today. I believe Alana's just looking for our next presenter. Beaming over, is he? Okay, just in time model.
Come out behind you now.
Good, yeah.
You got a drink?
Yeah.
I didn't get a drink.
You too.
Busy one.
Actually, really talking to that lady about her aspirated W's because she's Scottish.
Oh, yes.
Hold on.
In sales.
This will be the next one over. Yep. Arrows?
All good, Mr. Mayor?
Yep. Welcome, John. Thank you.
Good morning, elected members. Mayor. So yes, I'm just going to go through the paper that I put forward to the briefing. So I just rounded council ownership of land. We've got significant holdings around the district, over 300 pieces of land of various sizes, and not all of these are currently utilised. Some are just sitting vacant and not doing a lot. And in addition to that, there's numerous sections unformed, what's called legal roads, or paper roads as they're commonly known. And I think a couple of months ago, council made a decision on quite a substantial chunk of that out at in the northwest of the district, about stopping that and potentially selling it to the adjoining landowners. So some of the current values of land and buildings, 7.1. Reserves is around 27 million. Now, not all reserves are owned by council. A lot of them have a Crown derived, but that doesn't mean that they can't necessarily be sold. And the practice normally is that DOC, on behalf of the Crown, will share proceeds with the local authority in most circumstances. Normally the starting point is a 50-50 basis for that. And of course, roads and footpaths, which I've already mentioned. So there's been some previous council resolutions to sell land, dating right back to 2010. There's a whole bunch of land was identified as surplus. The process they went through then, they didn't actually check whether council had the legal ability to sell some of these pieces of land, so they resolved to sell them. And then work through the process later, which is not often an ideal situation, because you sometimes get people coming out of the woodwork and describing reasons why something shouldn't be sold. Back in the Commissioner's Day in October 2015, there's a section at 65 Normanby Street, vacant section. It's a funny angled piece of land that the Commissioners thought could be sold, but hasn't been a lot of interest in that. It's currently utilised as parking, mainly for the library, but it's not formed parking or anything, and it's on a funny angle. And back in September 2017, the council resolved to sell all the forests, including the Catchment and Glink Scully forests, which most of the forest went, but there was some hiccups with the Catchment forest particularly. And then most recently, on the 13th of December last year, the 16 Ruawai Wharf Road, which council now has an agreement on, a unconditional agreement. So looking through those pieces of land, these are the ones that have been previously identified as potentially surplus and can be sold. And then just some commentary on that. The 89 Logan Street, it's been offered to multiple parties over the years, but seems to have limited appeal because it's just down the road from the stockyards, and currently used for grazing. 65 Normanby Street, there's been some discussions. I think Rabobank at one stage were looking at it, but they ended up building down by the ambulance station. And the Catchment Forestry, the sale to Holyoake Industries, was not able to be finalised because of issues with the adjoining Maori freehold land, which council leases. That provides access to our catchment forest, and we're still working on resolving that with the Maryland trustees. And Red Hall Forestry, and that was going to be in conjunction with the catchment forest as well. Some policy and legal considerations. Obviously, we've got the Treasury policy, which outlines that we'll only hold land where there's a good purpose to do so, and it's relevant to the delivery of services. We've got the property and sales acquisition policy, which says that our portfolio should be regularly reviewed to ensure that that the land we're holdings for a valid reason and continues to be fit. And then when we're starting to look at selling land, there's a whole lot of implications we've got to go through, in particular the Local Government Act, Section 76 particularly, and strategic assets. Our strategic assets in relation to road and reserves say that those are a portfolio, so not an individual piece of land or reserve is not strategic on its own, so they can be bought and sold as part of that holding. Section 138 is on the restrictions on land that's been designated as a park. So, for example, Mangawai Community Park up here, it's freehold land, but council, if it was ever to decide to sell a piece of it, would have to go through a process similar to the Reserves Act and do compensation because of Section 138. And then in Section 140 and 141, there's land that's held in trust and an endowment. An example of that is the land out at Tangatoria, where the Sports Association have the fields and the new building. That's land that's held by council and trust. because of the way it was acquired by the community back in 1948. And the other considerations we need to work through is around Public Works Act, the Reserves Act, if it is a reserve, and Local Government Act 1974 for road and road stopping and sale. Some things we've previously looked at or are working on is the Lot 33 in Greenview Heights, which was previously leased to the Mangawhai Golf Course and is now no longer leased. And so we've agreed an exchange of that land, reserve land, with a portion of Mangawhai Park. And that, once that's completed, will free up that section, and so potentially could be sold. There's just some technical things that need to be worked through in relation to the former lease and things there that's holding that up. There's a piece of land, a local purpose reserve, between 3 Furlongs Hotel and the Gull, Kaiwaka. And you wouldn't know it was there because it's basically all been covered up with driveways and seal and stuff like that. So there has been some discussions with the adjoining landowners about potentially selling that land. Would have to go through the reserve revocation process for that, publicly notified and so forth. 97 Wintle Street, that's a piece of land up the top of Wintle Street. It's been was a reserve that was created in subdivision back in I think in the 50s. And there's a bit of unformed road there, which would create a nice house site. So potentially council could look at selling a piece of that land if it went through the road stopping and reserve revocation process. Probably quite valuable because of its elevation and height and views. And of course the roads out in the northwest to Waitamatuhi Farms, the 82 hectares, which once they've been through the road stopping process, that land can be sold. And there's a piece of land in Estuary Drive where the adjoining owner is quite keen to buy some of it. And I'm just going to use that as an example. So the owner of 136 has got a funny shaped section, and because of the topography and stuff, making it difficult for him to build. So he wanted to acquire the adjoining, or some of the adjoining legal road, which is not formed and not utilised in any way. And he proposed giving access to the adjoining Esplanade Reserve that goes around the new subdivision out on the point of Morgan.
How big's that piece of land?
So the section that he's wanting to buy of road is about 936 square metres. And we had a valuation done on it last year. It's about 180,000. And then we've also had some values done on the access way that he's proposing to provide. And so we would acquire it as an easement, it would be 38,000, or freehold 78,000. So it's just the question of whether council wants to acquire that access. It probably makes sense to join up to the Esplanade Reserve that runs around the headland and give public access to it. But we would have to accept at least a reduction of 38,000 on the value of the land that we potentially sell to the joining landowner.
Which is 136?
136 is a triangular section, so.
Bit of road to be stopped with section 1?
Section 1, that's right, yeah.
Oh, okay, section 1.
So this is the section, the section 1, 936 square metres.
Section 1, yeah.
Yeah, and then up here, up on the top of the section, there is this potential access way into the Esplanade Reserve, which runs along around the headland on that Moore Point subdivision. So, yeah, happy to take any questions from elected members. So, the thing I'd say about land sales, it is very time consuming and resource intensive. So it's something that, while it's can be quite fruitful for council, it requires resourcing. That would be my comment.
Any questions? Sir Vincent?
I was wondering with that specific block, where are we at with a coastal walkway situation there? Is there anything there that can be used to advantage to help that along?
Well, we have to wait until individual landowners go through a subdivision process and they then have to give up the Esplanade strip or reserve. And so there's still lots of gaps around the walkway, around the harbour edge because of.
This proposal have the effect of like making it permanent, a gap, or is it?
Well, it would provide access to the existing Esplanade reserve that runs around the headland.
Yeah.
But it doesn't link to other bits of the Esplanade reserve that run around the harbour.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't provide a contiguous access way around the harbour edge.
Yeah, but it does provide some public access.
All several sections.
Councillor Manderson.
Thank you. How many hectares in Kaipara are plantable potentially that are impeded by these restrictions?
Well, in terms of reserves, there are ways that council could look at planting reserves, but it just depends on access and things like that. So some of them may not have good legal access. There might be Esplanade reserves where there's no way of getting a road in and stuff like that. So you wouldn't want to plant them as a plantation forest, for example, because you need to be able to harvest them. But potentially they're probably already regenerating native forests anyway. So I'm not sure we'd get any credits for them.
Further questions? Thank you, John.
Could I just make a comment?
Yep.
To me, I think it would still be good business for us to even make properties available at a bit of a discount if it means that at least they'll start to collect some rates, and particularly like you're thinking of the investment in the cost of road stopping, which I know is not cheap and it's time consuming and all. But if at the end of it, we get another ratepayer, another GUAC, then it's generating more potential income from just something that's already there. So I think that's a relevant factor to take into account. So.
Just finally, does any elected member have feedback on that Esplanade strip? I guess because the adjoining owner is quite keen to progress that.
I'd like to physically go and have a look at it.
Yeah.
I gave a decision on that.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe we could arrange a time to go and have a look. The elected members want to go and have a look at it.
And also, could I ask you, while we do that, could we look at, I'm not exactly sure where the 97 Wintle Street is.
Yes, yeah.
And just to praise ourselves for that one too.
Mm-hmm. So I could perhaps organise a little trip for the interested elected members.
It might be diving down into deep detail and all, but I wonder if we're going to be legally establishing an easement there, should we be doing anything about having it formed as part of the same package? Because there's like as part of the equation in the deal, so that actually gets done, so people can see that there is actually improved access to the foreshore rather than something, an agreement on paper, which gets sort of lost in people's use of it as a private landowner.
Yeah. I'm sure the owner would be open to that discussion, but of course they'll want that cost being discounted off the land.
Be part of the equation, but at least it'll be getting done, that's all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So our next presenter is stuck in traffic at the roadworks.
No, here though.
Not here, on the way here. So
We have a refreshment break or what?
yeah, we'll have a break for 5 minutes. And I don't know, it looks like as far as timing goes, we're going pretty quick. There might be an opportunity this afternoon to go and look at those properties. Just check while you're here. Yeah, because we are going through quite quickly.
Evening. Next item on our agenda is number 6, Litigation Review Project. Welcome, Shireen. Yeah, as well.
Thank you, Morena Tato. So we're here today to talk about the next phase of the Delegations Review Project. Apologies for reading off the screen, it's quite small. So just to recap, the delegations is every council has delegations. It is a standard procedure. It is a standard requirement of every local authority to have a set of delegations that staff operate under. It allows for, otherwise, council would be meeting all day, every day, making a range of decisions on these matters. So it supports administrative effectiveness, well, it supports the function of the council. It also allows council to retain authority for things that it wishes to retain authority from. Not everything has to be delegated. It provides for delegations to specific staff, so that have the technical ability to perform functions. The delegation under the Building Act are an example of these, where it's only qualified building officers who should be able to assess buildings and the like. The principle of delegation is to encourage the delegation of decision-making to the lowest competent level to best support the purpose of the delegation. So the idea is that the person who deals with this matter on a regular and repeat basis is the person who's best set to act under these, to make that delegated decision. And the last point is, just because somebody has got a delegated authority doesn't mean to say they have to act. So if an officer has delegated authority to act on a certain matter, and they consider that due to the circumstances of the event that this is possibly something that they don't want to make a decision on, they can refer it to their manager can refer it to the CE, and the CE can say, no, we're going to take this to council for a meeting. So it doesn't mean to say that an officer will always act, an officer always has the ability to refer a delegations upward ultimately to council if that is the appropriate scenario in that particular scenario. So apologies for the rather large and long set of attachments here. Delegations is a big piece of work. It's quite fine detail and quite it's very I-dotty and T-crossy kind of piece of work. So there's quite a few details to go through. Apologies. Delegations policy. I've had too many coffees. So the delegations policy, council had a delegations policy, but it was lost in time somehow, and we're a little bit unclear about what happened. When I did the policy review project a couple of years ago, and was trying to find every single policy that council had adopted. At that time, it didn't surface in those in those investigations. However, looking back at the records a little bit further back, we found that there was actually a delegations policy adopted in 2014. So that technically is currently a valid policy. The delegations policy has been reviewed and updated to meet more plain English standards, but it is largely along the lines of the existing policy. So it incorporates those key aspects. So the approach of the delegations policy, which was in 2014, so that remains, is that where possible, council delegates functions, duties and powers to the chief executive, who then sub-delegates to staff. So, and in that case, legislative delegations are retained by council in a by exception approach. And this allows for more efficient administration of delegations by the CE, and it again supports the principle of delegation to the lowest competent level. So what that means as practice is that council, in terms of the legislative delegations, council delegates all functions and powers under a piece of legislation or a regulation or a rule to the chief executive, with exceptions. So those exceptions are listed. They are often exceptions due to legally not being able to be delegated. The power to make a bylaw, council cannot delegate the power to make a bylaw even to a committee, for example. And then the chief executive operates a delegations register where the chief executive chooses to on-delegate the relevant functions to the relevant staff. So that allows for changes in legislation to be acted on. It allows for changes in positions and titles to be acted on. It allows for a more easily administered delegations approach to that. So that's the overview of the delegations policy. So sorry, I realise I'm talking really fast because there's so much material to get to. I'm sorry, I'll come down now. So the delegations policy has been updated to reflect current practices and retains the general approach of the 2014 adopted delegations policy. So the delegations that are covered in this briefing then, framed by that policy, are the legislative delegations to the Chief Executive. So that is your attachment F, I believe, if I've got that right. It's a very large spreadsheet, and we'll get to the, yes, that is that one. We'll get to the matters in that. There are the legislative delegations under the Local Government Rating Act, which is directly to position titles. So it has been outlined prior. There are two pieces of legislation that do not allow for sub-delegation. So under the Local Government Rating Act, under the Resource Management Act, there are sections in those pieces of legislation that specifically preclude sub-delegation, which means that council must delegate directly to position holders. And the Local Government Rating Act delegations are also provided as an attachment. The financial delegations have been reviewed as a result of the recent restructure. So as the financial delegations, like the Local Government Rating Act delegations, are delegated directly to position holders because those position holders have changed, because the titles have changed, and also because the restructure has meant that functions have shifted between staff and position titles. That means that the financial delegations have had to be reviewed to accommodate for that. And then the other matter contained in this item are proposed amendments to the procurement policy. So a further review after the financial delegations, after council reviewed the financial delegations in September last year, a review of the procurement policy found that there was a misalignment between the procurement policy and the financial delegations, and that there was some lack of clarity around what the appendix and procurement in the procurement policy, how that related to the financial delegations. So that's been updated to more clearly align to the financial delegations. Are there any questions, or would you like me to, at this point in time, or would you like me to carry on with the presentation?
I've got some comments to make at some later point.
Okay, I'll carry on then. So legislative delegations. There are amendments to 38 statutes proposed, and this is to swap as the item explains, this is to swap the delegations around from all of these sections are delegated to the CE, who then can subdelegate to the entire act is delegated to the CE with these exceptions. So those are amendments. Because of the intricacies of the Public Works Act, it's proposed that the Public Works Act delegations remains as individual sections delegated to the Chief Executive. The Public Works Act is a huge piece of work, and there are lots of variations there, and it's therefore proposed that these stay the same. So those are specific statutes. There are 28 statutes, new statutes added to the delegation. So the research has shown that there are some delegations missing across those new statutes. Some are new, some have replaced old statutes. 3 existing statutes that we have delegations for have actually been repealed since the last full review. And it is also proposed that 14 statutes are revoked from the delegation. So these are legislation where it's been considered that any decision-making under those acts should be retained by council. So for example, there was a delegation under the Bylaws Act 1910. All matters relating to bylaws should sit with council. So it's proposed that that one is revoked, as an example. There were, in the 2019 legislative delegations, there were some specific exclusions that the review found is that it would be best to remove those exclusions. There were some exclusions under the Impounding Act, the Local Government Act, and the Public Works Act that are highly administrative of nature, and it's unclear what the intention was of having those delegations excluded. Therefore, the power to dispose of seized property under the Local Government Act, for example, is right at the end of a very long process under the Local Government Act. Should an enforcement officer seize property, and if that property isn't claimed, and if the person doesn't want it back, and the 6-month waiting period and the storage, and right at the end of the process, council can then decide to seize property. So that's an example of an enforcement officer being able to make the decision to try and sell the seized property. There's not that many secondhand signs that anybody would want to buy, but it is the ultimate outcome that the Act allows for, to try and sell, to retain costs. So that's an example of those exclusions. So moving on to the Local Government Rating Act delegations, as I said, they cannot be sub-delegated under section 132. So we've reviewed and updated these to reflect the restructure and best practice approaches. And due to the wording of the Local Government Rating Act, they also automatically include the delegations under the rating policy. So there are sections in the Act that refer to implementing the adopted rating policies of council, so it includes those delegations as well. And then onto the financial delegations. There are some new delegations included in the financial delegations, and this was after an assessment with the Risk and Finance Manager and looking at, and also talking to our CDM staff. And there are some delegations proposed for civil defence matters. So when a person is acting in that role, when there is a declared emergency, the person who is then acting in that role has got the power to spend money. It just means that when an emergency is declared, so it has to be a formal declared emergency, and then that person under the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act is appointed into that role, they are able to then authorise the spending of money. So obviously, as you may be aware, the way that purchase orders are raised at council is that somebody has to raise a purchase order and somebody has to approve it, a separate person, to ensure the integrity of the purchases and that they align. And in this case, it would just streamline the process to allow the people who are on the floor at the time to have support staff raise the purchase order for them to approve the purchase order for, I'm frequently told that helicopter services were procured last time during the event. And it's to manage the administration better at that point in time. There's also this is for completeness. Council will be aware that we collect the rates on the Northland Regional Council rates on their behalf, and then we transfer the funds to them. That transfer is more than $1 million most of the times, and this is just for clarity and for completeness to authorise the CE to approve that transfer of money, because that goes beyond the CE's $1 million financial delegation. So that's an administrative matter to transfer the funds collected for Northland Regional Council to them. So out of the financial delegations, there are 15 delegations with no changes. There are 11 changes to reflect the restructure has resulted in some tier 3 roles becoming tier 4 roles and some tier 4 roles becoming tier 3 roles. Generally across council, where a position requires a delegation, there are some tier 3 and tier 4 roles that don't have delegations at all because they don't require them at all, but where a tier 3 and a tier 4 position is, generally, the delegation amount for a tier 3 position is $50,000 and a tier 4 position is $10,000. So that's been swapped around to match whether that role is now a tier 3 or tier 4. There have been 3 changes to accommodate splits in functions around the restructure. So, for example, there was a previous position where that position was responsible for 2 key delivery elements that required larger purchase orders. That role has now been split into 2 different roles, so those 2 different roles require that larger element of delegation. There are remaining delegations that have been mapped to new roles with no changes in value. So, and then the last element of today's presentation, the procurement policy amendments that I've already spoken to, and that just gives you the summary of what that's about. That was a very, very fast run through the delegations.
Councillor Vincent.
I've got a couple of questions to start with. Firstly, do you know if across the country, have there been many court cases arising from a test of whether someone was appropriately delegated to carry out a function that they did on behalf of council?
Absolutely. So I attended a webinar provided by Taitura recently that was presented by Simpson Grierson on delegations on that exact matter. And half of the presentation was about court cases where lacking delegations had been challenged. So it's that thing where the process is often what is questioned in these circumstances, and the question was whether the appropriate delegation was in place. So
part of a judicial review type case.
Yeah, and so a couple of funny stories in there too, but yes, absolutely, there are court cases where the lack of delegate, where the challenge is, did the person have the appropriate delegation to act? So that was a great learning and reconfirmed for me a lot of the work, but I was also able to build on that as well and incorporate that advice into what's proposed to you today. Yes.
Yeah, okay. Now, it can be reasonably inferred from what you've presented that the delegation is to the office rather than the office holder to the person. Is that correct?
Oh, definitely. Delegation should not go to a individual human being. Delegations should go to the office holder. That means that if I'm no longer in my role, but my role has delegations, somebody new starts in my role, that person has those delegations. Absolutely.
Well, that's my questions. I do have some comment to make. If perhaps others might like to ask questions first.
Anyone else want to ask some questions?
Okay, well, so moving right along. Okay, well, for me, I was at first reading of it, I didn't really engage with it particularly. I thought, oh, just another big lump of sausages and we'll just process it. But I have a concern that the more detail we have, the more we've got to go wrong, and to provide an opportunity for us to get picked up on a technicality. And, you know, as a council, we have some history of that. Not in relation to delegations, but say with the wording on our rates notices, for instance. And I just wonder if it's possible to find another way through where, firstly, we reinforce the relationship between council and the CE in that we delegate, whatever we delegate gets delegated to him, and over to him then to sort out the sub-delegations. But like for me, I'm not interested in the levels of financial authority between different roles. We've got to place our trust in this man here, that he's comfortable with whatever he settles on. And it's just like this, by us signing up on this, we're accepting details are correct. And I think that's an unnecessary risk that we're exposing ourselves to. And if there was another way of being able to present this so that, firstly, perhaps at a policy level, we establish what our intentions are, why we are making these delegations. One is for practical operational reasons, and we want to see the organisation be able to function efficiently, those sort of things. And that to achieve that, we're delegating all these things to the chief executive to sort out in his business. If he wants to have things down to that level of fine detail, well, good luck. But I think that if we can find another way of expressing those so they are more generic, and perhaps, rather than specifically referring to section and subsection of different acts, aggregate those more under different parts of an act, like say with, talking about road stopping this morning, all the actions necessary to complete a road stopping, say, under the Public Works Act or under the Local Government Act, or both, or whatever. It's like, put it in those terms, then that would mean that if there's amendments to that legislation, that the delegations don't have to be altered. and such. Or if there's an organisational review and different people end up doing that job, but the authority is still there without having to change the delegations again. So that's just I haven't thought that through, but just occurred to me it's almost overwhelming, that degree of detail. It's just so easy to get, you might get one number out in the wrong place in terms of whether it's section number 14 subsection 3 or is it section 13 subsection 4 or whatever, and that's blown the legality of, or the technical, only from a technical point of view, but I didn't think there had been many cases actually on delegation challenges.
If I may respond to that.
Yeah.
So you've got, and apologies for the overwhelming amount of information for this item. It is very large, it's circumstantial, so I do apologise. For the legislative delegations, that is exactly what we're proposing. So we're proposing that all matters are but by exception are delegated, the chief executive for on delegation. So that's exactly what we're proposing, so that when a position title changes, if the act is amended, if there's anything to be done, then it's the chief executive's responsibility to correctly amend the delegations or update the delegations that are made. So the overarching legislative delegations are at the very high level. I know that's a large spreadsheet, but that is exactly that. It's by exception. And in many instances, out of those pieces of legislation that are listed, all of the powers and duties are delegated to the chief executive. And then the chief executive will on delegate if and when required. In some cases, the chief executive won't make any sub-delegations and will just retain the power for there's the New Zealand Postal Services Act, which I don't think we deal with very often, but if we need to, then the CE is the authority to do that. So the legislative delegations are doing exactly that, keeping it at the highest possible level for council to make a decision at. In terms of the other items that you've got in front of you, the Local Government Rating Act doesn't allow us to do that. So council has to approve the individual delegations to position holders. So there is no way out of that one. And the Resource Management Act delegations are coming to you as well. And they're a much larger beast than the Local Government Rating Act, which is one of the reasons why we're not presenting that to you as well. With the financial delegations, it's council's decision whether you want to retain the current practice of approving the financial delegations to position holders as is currently and is most the case for most of the councils, or council could give us direction to say that they want to give the chief executive the power to make financial delegations to staff positions as the CE sees fit. So that's entirely council's decision. If you were to want to do that, that would be within your remit to direct us to do that. It's entirely up to you. The other two items that are in front of you today are the delegations policy, which gives the policy overview of what the purpose of delegations is, why somebody is supposed to act, when they are not supposed to act, what they have to take into consideration, and provides that framework for staff to act under the policy. And then the last item is about just amending the procurement policy appendix so it aligns to the financial delegation. So in response to your comment, where possible outside of the financial delegations, that is the approach that staff are proposing here. It's entirely up to council whether you want to change the way the financial delegations are managed. That is entirely your call. It is normal practice that the council adopts the financial delegations to the position holders, but that's entirely your call.
I guess I'd be interested to know his views on that, given that it would be falling back onto him.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to say something as well. That's cool. I'm going to start general and then I'm going to get back to your point, okay, Councillor Vincent. So, the fundamental thing about delegations is they're really, really, really important, right? They're a risk when they're not up to date and they're not current. We came to you late last year or mid last year to say, hey, we need to do some work here. We need to make sure the org review was traversed through. And that's why Shireen's bringing all this back to you. councils in the past have been tripped up because there is always less of a focus on delegations than there needs to be, actually. And then, you know, the classic judicial review process, let's be honest, it's not about the decision that's made, it's about the process to get to the decision. And that's where delegations trip people up. Okay, so they're really key, they're really important. So that's the work that Shireen's been doing over quite some months now, and I welcome it because it's really key here for you. As far as the approach goes for financial delegations, look, I'm pretty comfortable with what we've got, to be honest. It gives you oversight of it. What we're suggesting here is very little change to what the council agreed to previously. It's not quite a problem for me. What I really do need to make sure is that our people understand their delegations by role. So the question is, have I got the delegation to make this decision? And our people need to ask that question themselves, need to confirm it with the delegations register as well. Now that applies to their normal daily work as well as the financial delegations. I'm perfectly okay with the financial delegations as they are, with the couple of tweaks that have been in there. It's working well. I have no issues. I do accept and appreciate your point of view, Councillor Vincent. Well, it'll cut out a lot of admin, but we'd still have to do this. It would just be up to me to do it. I appreciate council does like the oversight of financial delegations at least.
I was just wondering, would you be comfortable with accepting it as your responsibility to determine who had the authority to, rather than it, because I guess I'm trying to put a bit of a wall between the elected members and those staff in the event that someone has acted inappropriately, and make it quite clear that we can stay out of court.
Yeah, no, look, to answer that, yeah, absolutely uncomfortable. The previous time we brought the financial delegations, it was very clear that this council wanted oversight. So that's what we're doing. But if you decide you don't want oversight, that's fine. Then it's on me, and I'll make sure that the process is sound.
Just one opinion around the table.
No, it's fine.
Councillor Howard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. You've obviously done an awful lot of work, and you know, and that is appreciated. And it's to me, what this highlights is on the one side, it's what Councillor Vincent has raised about, you know, is there a wall? And I don't have an issue with the wall between governance and the implementation. But, you know, when you look at things like 28 new statutes added, you look at the comments you made about previous policies got lost, you know, things like that. So what do you propose in this moving forward in terms of a review cycle?
That's a great question, councillor. Thank you for asking. It's my continuous improvement junkie. So the CE has quite some time ago determined that we need a staff member responsible for the ongoing management and administration of delegations, and Joy is that person. So I'm running the review project, and then I'm going to happily hand over to Joy. So what we're going to have, which we haven't had for the last 10 years, and as the CE says, the problem with the work that I do is that it's very important very occasionally. It's kind of like I'm the person who packs up the first aid kit. And if I don't make sure the first aid kit is fully stocked at all times, on the one time in a 2-year period when you need the first aid kit and you haven't got the right kind of bandage in the first aid kit, it's a bit of a problem, right? So that's my job. So the thing is that, and the CE has recognised, the organisation has realised that I can do all the tidy up I like. The day I finish and hand this over, unless somebody's looking after it, we're going to find ourselves back in the position that we are now. So I was very pleased when we started working on this project that a staff member was nominated to look after it and administer it. Joy's also excellent at processes and systems, and I have every confidence that Joy's going to put a really good system, internal system and process in place so that we don't get back to the 28 new missing pieces of legislation. I would also add that there are, in the last 10 years, there are digital options available as well, and outside providers that could help us keep up to date with that as well. So there's plenty of options to make sure that we don't get back to this point.
That's great. And I think that, you know, we might go as far as to suggest that once a year, we should have mandated that, you know, we're updated.
Yeah.
So that keeps that evolving cycle going.
So in the policy includes that the CE will regularly update council as to any changes in the delegations. For example, if there's been quite a few legislative amendments, the CE will update council, and council can request the CE to update them on the delegations on a regular basis to keep them informed. So it works both ways. Yep.
Mr Mayor, if I could, it might be a good mechanism for that, might well be through the Audit Risk and Finance Committee as well.
That's what I was, yeah.
Taking that as part of the policy.
It's quite a complex discussion. You've got, I'm looking through here for Appendix 2 risk matrix for procurement of goods and services, where you've got a whole lot of red comments here. Some of them have been edited out. Well, you know, they've got a line through them. For example, under extreme risk, you've got all approved by council in conjunction with approval to award contract and associated delegations to CE for partial or full contract payments for 1 million or more. And then you've got crossed out 500k report to council for approval of procurement and approval to award contract. What's that telling us there?
So, sorry, through the, I didn't quite hear that. Which
Page 17 of the 138.
Yeah, the attachment, the procurement.
3 of the attachment, Appendix 2 risk matrix for procurement of goods or services. A table there, which is negligible risk, low risk, moderate risk, high risk, extreme risk.
Yep.
Yeah, I just like you to explain to me what you've done there in terms of.
So on the page on this, so are we talking about table 1 or table 2, Your Worship?
Table 2.
Table 2. Okay, so table 2 was in discussion with the procurement policy owner. It was a little bit confusing because this column was about the procurement plan approval, but it got mixed up with who had the financial authority to approve the contract. So so what it's done, it's retained the same financial decision making, and it's retained council's decision making in all spaces. It's just made it clearer who makes the decision, how the decision is made. So, for example, with a moderate risk, the procurement plan approvals for 1 million or greater remains with council. There's no change there, and then, as council is aware, when you award the contract, when you approve the contract, then you give the delegated authority to the CE to award the contract and make any payments for that contract. So there is no change. There's no change. There is no. If your question is there any reduction in council's authority in this column? Then the answer is no. It's just clearly aligning where that the dollar values were out in terms of the financial delegation. So the CE can approve contract between 500,000 and $1 million. And that's, for example, and that's just clarifying that with those bigger value contracts. That's the intent. If it, I appreciate it's hard to read it in track changes sometimes.
Okay, Councillor Larson.
Oh, thank you, Worship. Yeah, thanks for sharing. Is the example of the mayor's giving the not changing the financial threshold at all? I mean, it's what I heard him read out. It was one was 500,000, the other one was 1 million. What you're saying, there has been no change to the financial threshold.
So basically it's aligning, I'm apologising if I'm not answering this question correctly. It's aligning the procurement plan approval. So whoever can approve the procurement plan can approve the contract, the financial value of the contract. So the CE has got financial delegations up to $1 million. The CE therefore can approve a procurement plan and award the contract up to $1 million. The infrastructure services GM has got financial delegations up to $499,999 and can approve a procurement plan for that value. So it's matching the procurement plan with the financial delegations. So there's been no change in who gets to approve a procurement plan. So all procurement plans over $1 million remain with council.
So at the moment, there's a misalignment between the procurement plans and the delegations, is that correct?
It was unclear in terms of who had the authority. So the procurement plan approval was clear, but it was inconsistent with the, sorry, I haven't looked at this for a while. So it says for something greater than 500,000, it was if delegated. So it's saying if it's delegated, so the CE has a delegation up to $1 million. So it's implying that if it's delegated, so it's saying that the procurement plan approval is with this, is the same as the financial authority.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your worship, I'm happy to give some direction on this matter. I'm happy for us to retain control over delegations below the chief executive. I don't want this item to come to the next available council meeting because of the amount of stuff that we've got on at the moment. I simply haven't had time to look at it in any detail, and it is complicated. I accept that we do need to push ahead and get this done, just not this month. And just really need a bit of time to have a look at all of these proposed changes. Thank you.
That's what I would.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just looking, Shireen, at attachment B, delegations policy, second page. And this is to my earlier point. In there, you got the review cycle as being 3 years. So the question is that too long? You know, it's part of a review. Should we actually make that more regular?
So through the chair, this is the review of the policy, not the actual delegations.
At the end of the day, as I said, that it's all part, you know, I mean, you understand about the delegations themselves, but this is the policy.
Yep.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I think, so what I would say here is the 3 years aligns with all the other policies we have. What we're probably guilty of, Councillor Howard, is not knowing we had the policy, if I'm honest. And, you know, now we'll put that on the register. We report the policy framework to the Audit, Risk and Finance Committee, as you know. For a policy.
They're probably right.
Right, yeah, but delegation register, definitely not. We need to do that.
Yep, okay.
Probably good to tie in with the electoral cycle, perhaps.
So there's an understanding, yeah.
Any further questions or comments, Councillor Williams?
Just comments that I agree with what Councillor Larson said about the timing and having, you know, time to look over all of this. So, yeah.
Can I just,
like, when would it come back to council?
Yeah. So we're going to look at, there's a imperative here because at the moment the delegations are delegated to roles that don't exist in the new structure. So, you know, we need to make sure we are able to have the structural delegations made, keep us legal when we're making decisions. Now the structure's in place from 1st of July, but so maybe we can focus on that part of the work. And I'll talk to Shireen after and see what we can do here to try and get that done. Because to be honest, there's a risk here if we don't approve delegations to the new structure and the new roles and staff are out there making decisions, doing their work, then there's a possibility of judicial review if something untoward occurs. Now, obviously it may not, but we do need to get it right.
Especially with the financial delegations.
Yeah.
Given
that there's not much change to the financial delegations, let's be fair, at all, we could try and bring that back separately.
I would strongly recommend that to ensure efficient and accurate functioning of council as at 1st July in terms of the restructure, the financial delegations are brought back to the June council meeting, yes. If we weren't going to bring it, if we hadn't managed to bring it to this briefing, we were going to suggest a temporary delegation, a temporary authority was made through to August, but for efficient decision making, we would definitely recommend that the financial delegations, given that they are changed only as a result of the restructure, to be taken to the June council meeting and the Local Government Rating Act delegations at a minimum.
If I may. I wonder if there's an opportunity here to actually try and future-proof the policy. Welcome back. So that we have a generic statement saying that the person who is conducting that function, whatever that function might be, still has delegated authority, even if their job title has changed, say, for instance. And I was just thinking of another example, building team. Back to my other point about making it more generic, like rather than saying authority under the Building Act 1991 and 2004, whatever it is, to issue a building consent under such and such, or issue a PIM and like half a dozen different, like citing specific sections in the Act, rather complete the actions necessary in order to be able to issue building consents in compliance with the legislation, say, for instance, so that in the event that there are amendments to that legislation, no change needs to be made to that delegation.
So what we'll do through you, Mr Mayor, if I could, we'll work out what we can do. We'll definitely bring the financial delegations back. Yep. We'll work out what we can do, probably as a minimum operating to get us through and to understand how we need to do that. So we'll do that before the June meeting and bring that to you.
Could I just ask, is there any other information that would be helpful in terms of assisting in reviewing the delegations?
Well, I mean, it doesn't attract everybody's attention to the same extent, but.
We're still going through a number of changes in the organisation that haven't been put in concrete yet. And I'm actually, my personal concern is that we, as elected members, we do have control over what is going out the door with good oversight. And I know you're trying to explain that that's there, but I need to get my head around it a little bit more as well. I mean, this morning I asked about a project where 3 projects are tied into one funding program, but you know, I can't see where they individually are itemised, you know. So, and you get situations where your residents, your ratepayer, come to you with issues, and you need to be able to know that you can see that things were done with good oversight. All right. So look, we'll leave it with what Sue Maris is proposing, and so we can have a good look at it. Thank you. Right, thank you. Sharon. Yeah. We're going to go straight into the next item. PICS.
Yeah, we are. We just need a minute or two to stop the live streaming. Thanks, Doreen.
Another couple